connection, right?
Yes.
Thank you. To our producer and lovely camerawoman.
Here we go. Right.
Parkinson's Talk, take 2.
Here
We're
we
ready.
go. Da-da-da-da.
And scene.
Right, we're on the way.
I'm Heather Kennedy. I write for Kathleen Kiddo, and
I'm not.
this is John Stamford, who needs no introduction.
Ladies first.
All right. Have you ever played the Parky card to escape a difficult situation? Why, yes, I think I have, at least once. I think that I was having a little trouble with a relationship, and I didn't want the other person to feel really horrible about what was happening, nor did I want them to take on any guilt or upset or shame about anything that they had done. So I then said, this is actually Parkinson's. These are Parkinson's symptoms and side effects that you weren't aware of. This is not your fault. Because the Parkinson's is really hard on other people around us, especially if they're unaware of the on and off times.
I was only thinking of getting a seat on a train, but that's much more interesting. What is the best lesson Parkinson's has taught you?
Humility.
That was quick.
Absolutely. Just completely humbling.
Your turn.
Knowing my limitations.
We're going to whip through these.
All right. How have your intimates and closest people dealt with your symptoms and the changes they've seen you go through?
I think that's a mixed bag. I think some people have handled it very well, some people have handled it less well. And the family, I think, has, in general, handled it well, if I'm honest. I think it's very difficult for children, particularly, to accept that their father has Parkinson's. I think it's you're trained to believe that your father's going to be there forever, and where you have to realise a little bit earlier that they are mortal and not going to be around forever. What and whom inspires you to carry on? Now, ooh, that's a good one. The obvious answer to that question would be Tom Isaacs, who's a huge inspiration. I watched a documentary on the GDNF trial just recently, and he came out of it very clearly as the real star. And I remember my brother, who'd never met him before in his life, said to me afterwards, "I can see why you so much admired the man." And he had a real charisma about him. It's strange, really. I mean, he's a short man, just no particular focus in life until he had Parkinson's, and then suddenly it's as though the Parkinson's had chosen him. You can't help but respect that kind of person.
What tips would you give the younger generation of people with Parkinson's?
I think it would be pay attention and engage with your Parkinson's, to be honest. You may just as well engage with your Parkinson's because it's sure as hell going to engage with you.
Yeah.
Has Parkinson's changed your belief in first impressions?
Absolutely. I have what I feel is more of a compassionate outlook than a judgmental or scrutinizing outlook. And before, I would think things like, that person, why are they doing that to me? Or that person, why are they in the way? Or why don't they think of others? Or why don't they ... Now I think, I wonder what's going on with them. And I'm more curious than snap judgment or snap impression. Because, boy, am I awkward.
We don't need to personalise this,
but really, first impressions can be totally off if we're off.
Yeah, no, indeed.
So why not everybody else too, whether they have Parkinson's or not?
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Okay. What role does faith play in managing Parkinson's?
I think for some people it's very comforting. It's for others it's of no consequence at all. It's for me, in many respects, I think the science kind of knocked that out of me, and I think it's a great pity. Not because I believe that the faith is right or wrong, but just simply because it provides a reasonable code of behaviour. And I think if you start with that, then you can't go far wrong. And increasingly, as I get older and begin to see the horizon approaching, I increasingly wonder about faith and wonder whether it would be very nice to have a deeper faith. And I think a lot more about it, certainly these days, than I used to.
Before you proceed, are faith and science mutually exclusive?
I think a lot of people would like to believe they are. I mean, but I always take the view that although there's no need for God in terms of what the science tells you, I don't know that necessarily means that there's no place for God, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And all the evidence going back to the Big Bang and so forth, being cited as evidence against a single deity,
Mm-hmm.
I think is questionable, to be honest, because if God does exist and is omnipotent, then he can sure as hell cover his tracks.
Mm-hmm.
What is the question you most dread me asking?
Ooh. What is my greatest fear about Parkinson's? And I think I know the answer. It is to be a burden. It is to become a burden.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
Ooh, what scares you more, living or dying? Absolutely dying. Because I have a lot of things I want to do before I go, and a lot of people to love, and a lot of people to communicate my love to.
I thought it said drama, but it says trauma.
Trauma.
Is trauma, repetitive trauma, partly responsible for triggering Parkinson's disease? Short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is I really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's reasonably good evidence, to be honest, that it does. Certainly head trauma increases the likelihood of it. People who've been boxers have a higher incidence of Parkinson's. I think also American footballers, of course, as well, which is a very high impact sport. There's reasonable evidence there from people like Forrest Gregg, I think it was, who's one of the first cases to come forward. So the short answer is I think yes.
Drum roll, please. Here with John Stanford
Yes,
in a lovely English countryside. What's next in advocacy?
I think what I'd like to see is a sense of balance, to be honest. I think advocacy is a volatile commodity. I think we go from a situation where medical investigators have the entire control over clinical trials, for instance, to the point where we're now pushing very heavily for patient involvement at pretty much every stage. And I think that's good, but I think it's also utopian, because I think to put it bluntly, a good many advocates really don't have the in-depth knowledge to be able to make meaningful contributions at every stage. And I think the danger of making a meaningless contribution is that it devalues the power of advocacy as a whole.
Yes.
So I think what I would like to see is a sense of balance, and I think for us as advocates to focus on the areas where we can make a difference and realistically make a contribution, rather than simply endorsing our right, as it were, to contribute. I think it's a case of finding that balance, and that I think is something that's lacking at the moment. We're still sort of fighting the battle to be recognised without working out really what we want to be recognised for.
Right.
Does that make any kind of sense?
Yes. We're so busy winning the marathon that when we get to the finish line, when we finally get the mic, we don't have something meaningful to add.
Yes, and that's a good way of putting it. There's a better way of putting it, in fact.
Yeah. Like
Heather,
that.
as always, has the better words.
No, I don't know about that. You're
Yes.
up. Yes.
Well, no. How has Parkinson's altered your perception of self?
I'm more in service and more community-minded than before. In America, in particular, we're very driven by individual. You know, winning above all else, shining, standing out, being unique. Look at me. Now it's like, look at this, look at us. What can I contribute? How can I use the skills or talents that I might have for the greater good of all concerned? So there's a more community sense.
I think that's a good point, to be honest, because it's, and I think it's very much an American issue, because I think America, as you say, struggles with the notion of identity and relativistically as well. My impression is that in America there is a lot of benchmarking, I suppose, how one positions oneself against other people, and less sense of community.
I rely on my community
Yeah.
We are all one. Indeed, it takes more than a village. It takes an international community to make advocacy and change and facilitate this change that we're hoping for. We want to change the face of Parkinson's.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think the internationalism of it is one of its greatest strengths.
Oh, I love it.
It's the fact that it's the fact that people like you and I are talking to each other.
Here we are.
Here, so from opposite ends of the world.
Yeah. Oof, has PD made you more or less spiritual?
I think that question was for you anyway. So.
Yes, I have always had an interest in religion and spirituality. I've studied Buddhism as a philosophy for my entire adult life. I've been to many religious and spiritual services from the Quakers. I've followed Baptists, Judaism. The Hindu ceremonies are fascinating to me. I grew up Episcopalian and then Presbyterian. I will say that I know that I'm not the highest power. I do believe in a higher power, and I do lean on that and ask for advice and guidance, and I do say, make me an instrument, make me useful. I do pray and do meditations. So yeah, I would say more consistently than before.
It's an interesting one, yeah. I pray from time to time, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, when I was younger, it used to be in times of crisis, but now it's sometimes almost a form of saying thank you as well.
In a way, though, as I don't believe in an interventionist God. I don't believe that I'm going to pray that my team wins, because then that means another team has to lose, in essence. It's not that simple for me. It's more of setting an intention and asking for guidance and help.
Yes, I can see that, as you say. The whole wartime notion of God on our side is ridiculous.
Yeah, that makes me feel very uncomfortable when people start talking like that.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think that the moment you go in that direction, you're capable of anything, and generally atrocious behaviour.
Yes, egoic, very. So.
My turn or your turn?
It's your turn.
My turn. What is your greatest fear with respect to Parkinson's?
Just for me or you?
I don't know, I'll take it.
Yeah.
What is your greatest fear? I think we've almost covered it, haven't we? Because you were saying, it's being a burden, and I think that's probably pretty much the same for me. I think it's also the question of providing for the children, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to do a lot of this thinking recently in terms of my pension. And just simply doing some stark numbers really does put it into very difficult light when you actually think to yourself, if I live beyond such and such an age, I'm going to have to sell the house, basically, because I won't have enough money. On the one hand, it's kind of sobering to realise that in terms of your children, you are actually better off financially to be dead, basically, for the children's sake.
Well, that's discouraging.
Well, it is, but it's the harsh mathematics of it. But and that's kind of sobering.
Yeah.
It also means you watch out for any unusual mushroom dishes.
Is this nightshade?
No.
Would you like a little hemlock or arsenic in your... Yeah.
That's no, I should stress that exactly at this point that there are no allegations to be made in that direction.
Once that you decided on a killing. I think there's a song about that.
I'm sure there is.
Murder by Numbers?
Whose turn?
All right. Biggest challenge or challenges with Parkinson's? Just something that's tough.
Biggest challenges is feeling confident, I suppose. So when I go out of the house, if I'm truthful, there are some days when I genuinely don't feel like leaving the house because I don't, I get it into my head that people are going to laugh or I'm going to look scruffy or whatever, and as often as not I do. But it's some days it can be quite sapping. So it's not a very big thing, but it's And I mean, to look at me, you wouldn't think to yourself that there's a man who takes a great pride in his appearance, but at the same time, I don't like to look a complete scruff. So
John Prine is one of my favorite songwriters, and he has a song called "Hello in There." And it basically says when you pass me on the street, my body has sort of become a cage, but I'm still entirely here. Please don't just pass me by, please stop and say hello.
I had a postcard, not a postcard, I had a Christmas card from an old friend last Christmas, which said, "Are we all still here, even if we're not all still there?" And I thought
Losing my mind.
that was wonderful.
You're up, I think?
Am I?
Yes. These are great questions.
Silver linings. What are the silver linings of being slower in physical pace? I struggle to find money, to be honest. It's. I think the only thing I would say is that it does give you time to reflect, time to think as you go by things,
Yeah.
rather than actually. It's a bit like driving in the slow lane rather than the fast lane on the motorway.
Yeah.
You have a chance to see the signs before you go past them. So I suppose that's the biggest thing. Yeah, it makes you more body aware as well, I would say. In the sense of, yeah, it just gives you more time to reflect on things. And I think there's nobody really in life who wouldn't benefit from having a chance to reflect on things.
Yeah.
Reflection's good.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people nowadays, especially in modern society, I think feel that reflection is somehow downtime, it's wasted time, and I don't think it is. I think it's highly productive time.
Mm-hmm.
We're down to the last couple, I think, now.
Do you have a sense that time is going quicker since diagnosis? And if so, how do you handle such urgency?
Who's answering this one? What was the question again?
Do you have a sense that time is going quicker since your diagnosis? Do you feel like time's running out?
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so, and I'm painfully aware that there are more years behind me than there are in front of me. And I have to say, I increasingly count it in terms of number of days. You know, working on the assumption that if I live for, let's say, for the sake of argument, 10 more years, then that's 3,650 days. So then when I cross off on the calendar, you know, put a line through each day, I think to myself, well, that's 1% of my total allowance. You know, and when you think of it in those terms, it's really quite chilling. And you think,
Yes.
what do I actually achieve now that I hadn't, say, 30 days beforehand done?
Yeah. And do you want to ask the next one?
Miss Kennedy, how would you
Yes, Mr. Stanford.
how would you define legacy in Parkinson's?
Have I left the community better than I found it? And when I say better, I mean, have I contributed something useful or helped even just one person feel less isolated in their condition?
It's. I mean, I always think people talk about a lot about ripples, and I always think that's a very good metaphor. That the ripples go on long after the person themselves is gone. And I think if one can achieve that, then one's doing pretty well.